While Torracat has speed over its final evolution Incineroar, Dartrix has a considerable amount of more bulk than its final evolution Decidueye. And we can see this by looking at its base stats being extremely well-rounded with 78 HP, 75 in attack and defense, and 70 in special attack and special defense. But the big thing here is that Decidueye actually does not gain any base HP or defense when it evolves from Dartrix, so it keeps the same two stats, and it only gains more in attack, special defense, and speed. This means that putting an Eviolite on Dartrix actually makes it much more physically bulky than its final evolution. However, this does also factor in the change in typing, and while the immunity to ground is nice, the quad weakness to ice is actually very harmful for anything trying to wall opponents, since it's a very common coverage move and probably the most common typing to be run with hidden power. But past this, Dartrix does have good resistances in water, fighting, and grass, and its weaknesses, while it does have a handful, they could be worse. There could be far more, and they could be far more common typings, especially for lower tiers. Looking at Dartrix's abilities, the long reach ability is currently unavailable at the time of making this video, but Overgrow is the same ability that all starters have. It boosts your grass type moves when you're at low health. So it's okay, I guess, but on a bulky mon, it really doesn't matter that much. Long reach means that you will not take damage from you will not have contact with your opponent, which from there means you won't take damage from things like Spiky Shield, Iron Barbs, you won't activate effects like Flame Body and Static, you won't make contact with your opponent, which is handy especially on a Pokemon that likes to run contact moves, which would be more of Decidueye's case than it is Dartrix's. So I really only have one set for this Pokemon, and that is a super bulky set that could run either offense, even though it really doesn't matter. So your main item would obviously be Eviolite to boost those defenses and make them very, very high, actually. You would run either an Impish or Bold Nature, depending on what kind of attack you would want to reduce. You run Impish to reduce your special attack, that way you could be a physical attacker, and Bold does vice versa. You'd max out your HP, but minus a little bit, so you could switch in extra on Stealth Rocks. Max out your special defense, and put a little more in your physical defense, just to have that bulk on both sides. You would then run Toxic to wear your opponents down. You would run Roost for longevity, plus you'd run Roost over Synthesis because you lose your flying type weaknesses to both rock, and you lose some of your weakness to ice whenever you use Roost in a turn. You would also run Defog to get rid of any hazards, and there are very few Rapid Spinners and Defoggers in lower tiers that are viable, so I think this is a great reason to run Dartrix in lower tiers once they begin to form. Your last move is really just so you don't get trapped by taunt users, and it could be either Leaf Blade, Energy Ball, it could also be other moves like Brave Bird, but the main idea behind it is just so you have something to knock out your opponents that are almost defeated by Toxic, something to hit your opponents with if you're stalling them out and you're already at full health so you don't have to heal. Other moves this Pokemon gets, you could be that guy that runs Confuse Ray and tries to hacks out your opponent with Toxic Confuse Ray and then just roosting every time they break through confusion, but I don't recommend it. I don't care for that strategy personally, but you do whatever you like. There are also a number of setup moves that Dartrix gets, and it's kind of funny because I believe this is one of the only Pokemon that actually changes what Curse does when it evolves. In Dartrix's case, whenever you use the move Curse, you lose one level of speed, but you gain one level of attack and defense. But when it evolves into a Ghost type, it actually cuts half its health in order to cut a fourth of the opponent's health every turn. So it's a pretty big difference in that. You could also run Swords Dance and Nasty Plot, and the best thing about these three moves is they can all be baton passed on to other Pokemon, so your Dartrix can perform utility for potential sweepers on your team that don't have access to this kind of move. The final move it really gets of any interest is Sucker Punch, which is a decent enough priority move, but when you're not running any attack and it's not stab, it's really not doing that much damage. Honestly, I think Dartrix can be a very bulky Pokemon if you can look past the ice weakness and cover it with something else, maybe a Walrein or a Dugong, who don't care a bit about ice, especially if you're running something like thick fat on them. But in the end, Dartrix will never see as much use as Decidui, but I think it can be good on its own when it wants to be.